Hello, everybody. My name is Nathan Johnson, and I am a practicing attorney. I hope that doesn't send a chill through the room. I'm not actually here to talk about my day job. I am here to talk on behalf of my nonprofit, the Space Court Foundation, of which I'm a co-founder and executive director. And I'm also speaking as a 2023 Foresight Fellow. I want to talk to you about the Space Court and one of the projects we're working on called the Space Court Law Library. But to give some context, I want to summarize Foresight's seminar that I gave last month, which I titled Cosmology of Space Law. And Adam, I apologize if I misstate or misapply your entire field of study. But I just wanted to use this as an analogy because when I talk about space law and what the foundation looks at, it's not one specific thing. It's an entire universe of different texts and systems that actually all have very similarly a gravitational pull on each other and affect each other. And only when you look at it as a whole can you really get answers to specific questions. And so, the universe of space law sources, we start with international law, basically all international law that has existed since the mid-1600s in the Treaty of Westphalia. It exists. Space law exists within that. It's not just a carte blanche, a brand new law and a new system, but the treaties and the developing specific laws regarding space activities do start to add little changes and little adjustments to match the realities of the space environment. Those treaties flow down into the national laws. That's why in the treaties, governments are responsible to authorize and supervise activities of their people. And then the governments have domestic laws like the FCC, the FAA, to take on those activities themselves. And then, aside from laws that are literally written down, we have norms and practices of the governments and of those private companies. The way they conduct themselves, the things that they say and why they are doing certain things, develop those norms and practices. And eventually, if a certain practice becomes popular enough and enough countries state that the reason they follow that practice is because they think they have a legal obligation, then suddenly that combines into customary international law. Treaties only apply to the countries who sign them. Customary international law applies to all the countries. And it's this universe of space law which the foundation studies. We are a registered 501c3 here in the United States. But we actually have a global staff and a global class of interns, which really helps because we also have interns who are natively fluent in multiple different languages because these individual texts exist in multiple languages. Fun fact, the Outer Space Treaty, signed by the US, the UK, and Russia initially as the three depository countries, all of their versions co-equally control. So if certain phrase in one language is slightly different than another language, then we might have a problem if an argument comes down to exactly what that phrase means. And our staff and our interns are involved in primary research. We are looking at the actual original text of these source documents, not opinions written about them, not thought pieces, not suggestions, but the original text. What is actually law right now? And we called ourselves a space court because, like a regular court hopefully should do, our job isn't to create new law, it is to study the law, it is to reveal the law through argument. And like a real court, when a court adjudicates a case, especially in Western practice, it becomes precedent. And so a court reveals what the law is, and then that adds to the body of law. It becomes a reciprocal thing. And one of the things we're working on in our study of space law is combining all of these different sources and documents into one law library. Right now, all of these different PDFs on the website, all of these different statutory books, they all exist in different places. You can't go to one specific source to look them all up at the same time. Nor can you put them in one data set to be able to study them in the context of each other. One of the goals of the Space Court Foundation in our Space Court Law Library is not only to create a source where you can look up everything and compare it to each other, but to actually run machine learning over that data set to reveal patterns and lineages of thought and trace where one country got the idea to regulate an activity this way. And so who would be able to use that data set once it's all put together? Well, governments and courts, as they're developing new policy, as they're trying to answer questions for themselves about what the law means. Policy advocates, like our friends at Open Lunar or at For All Moonkind, who are advocating for new things based on an understanding of what currently exists. Businesses can look up to see what far-flung problems there might be with certain business plans or what opportunities there are. Academics, like the interns we already have and some of our partner universities, and future citizens. This is the far-flung foresight we are applying here beyond the next 20 years, when you actually have communities on Mars that need to answer a legal question for themselves. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure somebody here could tell me what the communication latency is between here and Mars, but you can imagine having a court case with that much time differential can really screw things up. So how can we enable self-governance when we get to that point in the future by providing them with something complete like this? So we are a nonprofit, and so we depend on sponsors and partners to be able to help us afford and enable the tools that we need to complete these goals. So we have interns right now. We have intern directors, but they're all volunteer. We'd like to be able to compensate them for their time, be able to send them out into the field. We also want to be able to afford archiving. Not everything is digitized yet. And that's not really a shock, but it's still really important. For instance, the treaties. All of the preparatory material, all the comments of those separate governments in leading up to establishing the treaties, those are persuasive materials that a court would consider. And they are currently undigitized in different offices of the UN, possibly in Vienna and New York. We want to do other source collection. We need to be able to host all of this data. We want to be able to design language models to analyze it. And then, of course, we want to be able to enable people to use it. So there needs to be good user design. So if you share our vision for enabling certainty with regards to the legal structure in space, you can reach out to me directly, or you can read more about us on our website. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Thanks for the talk. This is really interesting, and I hope you don't take my question the wrong way. But I have noticed in all the talks today, there's this recurring theme that legacy choices, 100 years back, are hurting innovation today. Legacy choice to not pick up the right bacteria samples, legacy choice to have this policy. And so I'm surprised, why are we not trying to establish new and better laws? Why are we digging through archives instead of having a fresh start?
So that would be a choice of the countries that are involved, right? But unfortunately, we haven't had a multinational treaty signed by all major countries since, I think, the mid-1970s. So it's really hard to get all those countries to agree. So unfortunately, whatever new thing we do still exists in the context of our current legal system. Now, I also said that this data set would help those policy advocates, because if you know what the law is right now, then you know what needs to change about it, or you can use it to your advantage to be able to reach your goals.
There is no international functional court system yet. Who's going to stop me if I go up and I do something that's against this treaty, up on space? Especially if, let's say I'm not even a citizen. Let's say I decide to have kids and decide to not ever give them a passport of any kind. They're lawless citizens. I send them to Mars. Okay, they do something illegal up there. What happens?
So that's a question of jurisdiction, right? And that's why it's one of those far-flung concepts, because the governments of the Earth, if they still have any of your property, if they still have anything that you associate with, they can execute, legal jurisdiction over that. But if you are completely independent on Mars and you don't depend on anything from Earth, that's a question for the future. That's what I sort of refer to as realpolitik. It's that's a real situation that could happen. But for the foreseeable future, if you have anything left on Earth, even if you are physically in space, the country that has jurisdiction over that stuff could still take it in a legal action. And the other aspect of that is the treaties are about country to country. So your country has an incentive. If somebody else in another country says, hey, you owe us $20 billion for damages of your space activity, your home country's like, we don't want to pay $20 billion. We want to go after you to fulfill the liability to them.
If you sell everything, buy Bitcoin, then go to Mars.
Unfortunately, can we do a quick one? Yeah.
Mine's not quick, so it's not.
All right, we'll leave it for the working group then.
Thank you.
Thank you, but I can't let you go without you telling us your challenge.
Well, this actually relates to the first question. I think my challenge is what new law or policy, or what existing law and policy should we keep to help speed up our development into space?
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
This was great.
Thank you.